Welcome to Turning Pages, Miles Olsen, the author of A Different Kind of Power. I absolutely love your book. Can you tell us a little bit of what inspired you to write the book for those of us who haven't read it as yet?
Um, what inspired me to write the book? I guess a season of life where that was just very humbling
Mm,
and where things weren't working out as maybe I envisioned in a certain way, like an extended period of being alone and single and working a very humble job and being a writer in a very humbling position of like sharing world with the work, and sometimes it just like feeling like it's going out and it being crickets. And yeah, and just having these things that were like maybe painful to the ego but really really good for the heart. And um just like really learning to soak in the beauty of um things not working out the way I planned, maybe. And just like finding out that that was oftentimes better than what my narrow-minded vision of success might have been. And living in a world where there's a lot of people who are championing maybe a more narrow-minded vision of success and
yeah,
wanting to like, yeah.
yeah. I actually came across your TikTok, I think it was a few months ago. I remember watching it and you mentioned that you were a waiter for many, many years. And then you also spoke about loneliness. And I think that's what caught my eye initially. And then you came across my TikTok again about a month ago. And I was like, oh, you wrote a book and you spoke about loneliness again. And that's what caught my eye again. And I was like, okay, I have to have you on the podcast to talk about it because for me personally, I feel like we are dealing with like a epidemic of loneliness. And it was definitely before COVID, but COVID sort of amplified it in a
Mm-hmm.
way, but the way you speak about it, it was sort of like I feel like it was a poetic way where you invited it in, you made peace with it. And that's a hard place to get to.
Yeah, it is. You have to walk over some pretty fiery coals to get there.
Yeah, no,
Well,
for
for most of
real.
us at least, yeah.
Yeah. And even like did this like this beginning for your creativity and your being, I guess, open on social media and writing your books, did it come from a heartbreak?
I think so, but not one singular heartbreak. You know what I
Heart
mean? Just
okay.
like maybe some of us are wired to like be more vulnerable to having our hearts broken, right? It's just like life does that because there's so much loss and confusion that's just part of being alive. Like people pass away. How do you deal with it? Like there's just like broad losses that we all have to deal with in our own ways. But yeah, it was definitely like I started like a season of writing that I'm still in, like 5 or so years ago at the end of a relationship and after losing a friend. And yeah, it was definitely like a place to go with the pain, basically. Because I'd spent many years, I think, trying to like fix or heal those parts of myself, and doing something creative with them was a lot more healthy for me.
Did you find yourself like at any point, like prior to just being, I guess, maybe open and consciously working on the healing aspect of yourself, were you being destructive before?
Was I being destructive? Probably, yeah.
Probably.
I don't know. Mostly towards
Uh,
myself, hopefully.
right.
Um, yeah.
I know, like, and another thing that caught my eye when I was like reading your book was when you spoke about going to the high school reunion. It was actually like a first time I'm seeing a male s- kind of like speak like that. You usually get like, oh, they don't have those type of feelings. Like they're not nervous for these things and stuff like that. And I think because we look at you guys as these macho individuals that are just, you know, they have everything figured out, where females I think the psyche is like we're thinking kind of like that, and we're not realizing, well, you guys are probably thinking it too. Because you mentioned that you were nervous and you had this anxiety of like, should I go? Should I not go?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And when I
Yeah.
spoke, like I went to this thing and in high school, I was like a shy, awkward loner. And so I shouldn't have wanted to go back to that environment because it was like a horrible emotional experience.
Mhm.
But now I'm like, no, 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 go back and see how you interact differently because you're not a shy kid anymore. Like you are a grown man who like loves the parts of yourself that you hated back then. um and yeah, just like talking to people and realizing like, oh, because I guess through writing and through just like living, I the thing that you're commenting on, just like being open with the vulnerability, um like that's the kind of art that I liked growing up. Like the music and the literature, it was all stuff where the artist had this like pain or anger or whatever, and they turned it into this like really beautiful thing. And so like, I don't know, is being, I guess, like a discipline or a practice to like learn how to like just own it. And so going into that environment, just like walking up to people and being like, I almost didn't come here. This is horrifying. Everyone was
Yeah.
like, yeah, same. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, but yeah, I mean, I can't speak for men. I can only speak for myself. But of course,
Right.
like, there are reasons that men either like don't feel certain feelings or don't show certain feelings because sometimes you can get your butt kicked if you do. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. With vulnerability, with being vulnerable.
yeah,
Yeah, with your emotions. I get
yeah.
that because I think I've been in the healing space for quite a while, so it's like it really looks different for both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear a guy talk about isolation or loneliness, or inner child healing and stuff like that, and it's I don't know, it just has a different take on it because it's not really you don't really hear men talk about it as often as probably women do openly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah, we're yeah better at pretending we have things figured out. Yeah,
Yeah.
or even
Um,
believing
yeah.
it.
So when at what age did you start writing? Were you always a writer?
um, I mean, maybe
Yeah.
we're all always, if you're illiterate, you write, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I started writing books in my like over a decade ago. Yeah.
What's your writing
And
process like?
oh man, that's a good question. My writing process is pretty like intense. Like I will just like the book that like a different kind of power. I
Mhm.
wrote that from like scratch, start to finish in 5 months, like complete like started from thin air, finished with a published book in like less than 6 months, which is a really, really fast. I mean, I
It
guess
is.
it's all relative. I don't, yeah, I'm sure other people write more quickly, but yeah, I just go into it. It's kind of obsessive, but I don't think it's unhealthy. It's just, it's like if you get passionate about anything.
Yeah, it's actually no, I was watching another podcast yesterday with Mark Manson and Robert Greene, and they were talking about the writing process. And if you get into it and you get like it's almost as if it's agitating, but it's also in a positive way.
Yeah, it's painful. It's weird
Yeah,
because it's like it feels so good and it makes life so much more alive, but
yeah,
it's not, it hurts like the whole time. It's like
yeah,
ice baths or something. It's like
yeah.
it's like just something that's very, and there's a restlessness that it gets going in me. It's like I've tapped into this vein and I'm afraid it'll go away, so I have to like see it through before it disappears.
So are you like one of those writers where it's like the dialogue, the words and everything is just like it's just there and you just have to get it out. You just have to get it out. Otherwise, if you don't, it's just gonna keep haunting you.
Yeah, it's like once I start it, it's like a living thing that I need to take
Okay.
care of. And it's like nurturing a garden or a new love relationship. It's like you just it's kind of the thing that matters.
Okay. So
And
is there like any kind of set routine with writing, or is it just goes?
when I'm writing, yeah, that's the other weird thing is like it really does require a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
Like it's a weird paradox, like so many things. It's like this passionate love that kind of pushes itself, but I wouldn't write unless I forced myself to like, I'll just put a timer on my phone for a minimum amount of time a day and like force myself to sit down and write because there's so many distractions. It's so easy to not write, you know, especially for me because I don't have a publisher like breathing down my neck. And when I
Right.
was writing this book, well, I had started when I wrote this book, it's like I had started to get some traction with my previous writing on TikTok.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, well, there's people I'm writing for now. But still, it's it's still like when you're kind of just doing it alone and it's yeah, you've got to be crazy. You really do have to be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I have sat down many times to try to write, and then after like I would, just zone off for everything, and then all of a sudden when I get to the laptop and try to write, it was like complete blank. I'm like, well, this makes no sense. But when I'm ready to go to bed, it's like all the ideas are like popping in my
Oh
head.
yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I don't know what to do. Am I supposed to be writing before I go to bed or when these ideas come in? Because when I do allocate time, it's like zip, nothing.
Yeah, for me, I like figured out these little tricks to play on myself to get the creativity to flow. One of them is, like I said, the timer. So like my inner critic or whatever would stop me from writing. It's like I can tell it like, just so you know, you can be lazy in 1 hour or 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. Like you can just scroll, you can do whatever you want, but right
Mhm.
now, give me a second. And then I also put on like atmospheric music or whatever. So I just
Right.
can kind of go into a zone.
Yeah.
And I also like promise myself every time I'm writing that I'll probably throw it all out. And that way there's no pressure. Like there's no sense that it needs to be good or perfect or refined or anything. And I almost never throw it out. Like occasionally, like I actually I wrote a few chapters of this book that I tossed, but
Hmm.
after every writing session, I never actually feel like that was bad. But I have to take away the idea that it needs to be like good or smart or beautiful or clever. All of that has to go away because then there's
Okay.
freedom, you know? Those are the
Okay.
things that work for me.
You're taking the pressure off of yourself not to be perfect.
Yeah, because I think creativity, it's like our inner child or whatever, right? It thrives without restrictions. It like an inner child, like when you and I were five, we weren't like thinking, am I playing the right way? You know, like if I draw this dinosaur, is like you just love creating.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important place to like to to go if you want to let it flow and not worry, like just not have that mean voice inside of you that would stop it from flowing, because I certainly have that voice
Hmm.
and I just need to like put it in its right place. It's like when we're editing, that voice gets to own the show, but right now we're just like
Yeah. So you talk also in the book about inner child. Like how did you get into that? Was it through therapy? Was it just on your own that you stumbled upon the concept of the inner child?
it wasn't through therapy. I was just like for a number of years I just went pretty intense with like the personal development and reading about, pop psychology, spirituality, different modalities of like psychological healing and stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, I guess I was reading all of that stuff and meditating a lot. And then I would just like, I think I just like absorbed the concept of the inner child. And then I was able to just like find that part of myself and have a very like direct, it just all clicked. It's like, oh, this is what I've been reading about. And this, if I'm alone long enough, there's just like this innocent part of me that emerges. And so I guess I had like the conceptual framework.
Was it painful in the beginning when you started?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to answer that question. Like,
The
Because
reason why
like,
I ask, I know for me, when I started the inner child work, I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this. I had so much resistance. I was like, this is
mm,
painful. For me, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to remember her. I don't want to touch on that subject at all. So that's why I asked, was it
mm,
painful for you? I know for everyone it's different, but for me, there was a lot of resistance for even starting the inner child work.
that, yeah, that that makes sense. That's pretty
Yeah,
fair. Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the first things that came up were feelings of pain and sadness and neglect,
yeah.
because it was a part of me that I had, you know, probably for legitimate reasons, like at some point disowned, and like not legitimate, like just because it was a matter of what felt like emotional survival. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
when I'm a 13-year-old kid surrounded by all these scary guys that might beat me up, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna stop like crying to certain songs, or like
Right. Yeah.
seeing the magic in the puddles or whatever.
Yeah.
That wasn't a I didn't have, like, now I'm in an adult body, so I can kind of get away with doing more of that stuff because
Right.
I can, like, I live in my own home and I am a protector of my own space and stuff, so but yeah, no, at the beginning, yeah, lots of pain, lots of crying, lots of like, yeah, just
Yeah.
like overflowing emotions to
Have you
feel.
done shadow work too, or
Yeah, I
yeah?
think so. Yeah,
I would consider part of the inner child work shadow work as well.
I think so. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like obviously I don't really write about those concepts, but I think the
Right.
shadow is just the parts of ourselves that we've like hidden and right or like put into the shadows. So that
Yeah.
would be.
And I think you also touched on your book about pornography.
Hmm.
So I think that would be considered shadow or like an
Sure.
addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the
Um,
other side of,
what made you
yeah.
decide to be so vulnerable in your book?
It's kind of like the last book I wrote was kind of in the same vein. It was just like part of it is just being me. Like there's
Mhm.
not a huge difference between like who I am and how I'm writing. Like this is just
Right.
like just being what it is. It's like, okay, let's just like be really honest in life and as a writer. And I think I already mentioned like maybe feeling like there's a lot of like artifice and spectacle in
Mhm.
our culture right now. There's a lot of people who are smiling and being happy, and then as soon as
Mhm.
the phone is away, they're just like kind of, I don't know, I don't want to speculate, but I think a lot of it is
It's true.
performance. And
No, it's
um
true because you always see it, especially when you see sorry to cut you there, but you see like the social media when you see like for example, couples when they're always doing these stuff or whatever together and they're so heavy into the social media and they're climbing up with the social media and the next thing you know, they're like getting a divorce. But what was happening behind the scenes?
yeah, and until like a week before the divorce post, it's like the love of my life just gave me flowers, and then a week later the narcissist has been torturing me for it's
Hmm.
so I feel like maybe a better answer than I was going to give is like I think that as humans, honesty is a nutrient that we all need. Like honest, sincere human connection, honesty with ourselves, hence like the inner work and stuff, just like
Hmm.
being honest. It's like a necessary nutrient. And we're living in this strange ecology with social media and everything where there's so many things that are like an anti-nutrient. It's like something inside of a lot of us is just like, what's going on? Is up down all of a sudden? Because nothing about this makes sense.
Yeah.
And so as a writer, I just decided like, well, I want to create something that's different. And it might not be better, but it's just different. And I'll like, yeah, sometimes I'll just like throw my ego to the wolves or whatever and be like, yeah, I'll talk about this really embarrassing thing about me like watching porn and being conflicted about it and then
Hmm.
quitting it and it being this weird, bizarre ordeal because um maybe someone will be like, oh my God, there's this nutrient of something honest there.
Yeah, because when I got to that part in the book, I think I had messaged you and I was like, wow, this is serious vulnerability, because I would usually hear like when men talk about the porn and stuff like that, they would be like, well, it's not good for you because of X, Y, and Z, but that's about it. You just got the bullet points, right, of
Sure.
why it's not good for you. Whether you come from a spiritual or religious community or religious background, they're just going to give you bullet points and not tell you, well, hey, this is actually what it's like for us, and it's hard, and hey, I'm going back to it because of X, that sort of stuff. So when I got to that part in your book, I was like, okay, and he's also single, right? So I'm like, if a woman reads this and she's probably going to judge, right? I'm like, it's such a vulnerable, thing. And I was just like, wow. I was like, this is really raw. Like it's precious, to be honest, because we need this. And like you said, we have this thing where everybody's sugarcoating it or even backing things up with like technical stuff where we're losing that humanity with things, in the healing space, in the self-development and just being human. So I really appreciated that part in the book.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was definitely a chapter where like when I sent my mom a copy, I was like, oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah.
She didn't mention it, but she thought it was great, the whole book. So
Yeah, no, seriously. And then because it's almost like I know for me it's a touchy subject, right? That whole pornography thing. But when I read it with your book, I was like, okay, so I understand a little bit more when it comes from another person. Um, so it was I guess I really appreciate the vulnerability with it. Because most guys would just be like, or most people, it doesn't say gender because most men and women watch it, right? But
yeah,
they would just be like, oh well, I stopped because I don't know, whatever, retention or mindset or
sure.
something.
Dopamine or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
dopamine, whatever, right? But you actually talked about like your struggle and your inner dialogue, and that's the thing too. And I think that's what like your book actually what makes a difference in your book is because you're actually you're saying a thing, you're saying it out loud, if that makes any
Right.
sense.
I guess. Yeah, like it seems like
Like these
maybe
are my
hopefully
thoughts
like
out loud.
conversational or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually find it's those books that I personally gravitate towards where I'm like, oh no, he just said that. You know, I was just like, I don't know. I'm a reader and I like, just like people being real
Yeah.
at the end of the day, right? And even the part, I think it was like shortly after that, we're talking about your singleness, like with your mom, like even when everybody asking you and stuff. Do you think it was like a whole process or this whole adventure with you being really comfortable just being single? Just like, yeah, I just don't need anyone right now. Like I'm just really in love with life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what this book is about. Kind of, yeah. And that, that whole pornography thing just it emerged in that space,
Hmm.
because I didn't have another person. And then this had kind of like filled in the space. But then, I was getting so open to nature and finding these other things. And it was just like, yo, who are you and what do you actually want? And
Mm.
yeah, like and it was just like once I really looked, it's like I'm not that and I don't want that. And I want to be like, yeah, committed enough to who I am to just be like, sorry, no, thank you. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely it's been a beautiful thing to get comfortable with that. And to
Yeah.
not even feel at this point, it's like it's not like I'm comfortable or that I feel like I want to champion the idea of being single. It's just like listening to oneself. And if you need to take space or however that looks, just like, if you're
I,
thriving and you're happy, then that's all
yeah.
good.
Do you think it's being alone or singleness like that's something that we have to just get used to?
I don't think so. No.
No.
No, like I think that people who like meet their high school sweetheart and get married, like what's wrong with that? You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah,
I only have my life to love. You know what I mean? Like I only have
right,
my experience to learn to like appreciate the miracle of that. You
right.
know what I mean? And so that's also why I write stories instead of books of like ideology or theory or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because the temptation of kind of staying on a, you know, on your high horse and being like, well, I found the way.
Yeah,
I don't think it's not very good for like writing or whatever. It's not very fun, you know.
yeah.
um,
Yeah,
but no,
because
I don't
you,
think any. I think if it happens and if it feels true, like I had some healing to do. I went through some stuff and I needed. There's probably many ways I could have done it, but having some space, I think it helped me. It certainly helped me as a writer.
do you think it definitely helped you with being a better partner in the future?
To be determined.
Yeah.
That's unknown. Probably, but I don't know.
But okay, okay. Um, but there was a part too, I think I highlighted it and put it on my stories because the way how you put it into words where you were just really in love with life and you didn't feel incomplete or anything like that. And me personally, recently I have entered that era where I'm just like dating, whatever. It doesn't phase me. Like I don't feel like I'm incomplete, you know? And it's been, I think, probably almost 6 years that I've been like on this, sort of healing path intentionally then. Um, but I remember there was a point where I was like, this is this is gut-wrenching, like this hurts being alone, like I need a partner. It's just like praying to the gods above, for anything. It's just like, please, just send me someone. But that actually got to the point where you were talking about in the book, where it's like you have this love that's just inside of you, the love for life, the love for the simplicity, the simple things. You don't feel like you're missing out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, that would be one of the things I learned. And one of the things I kind of wanted to like transmit in this book is like, I think that we really need to love and be loved as humans. I think that, yeah, like it's just like a huge part of for, and maybe that like looks different for every person. But yeah, this is a book about someone who doesn't have one particular kind of love, but that doesn't stop all of this love from flowing and being exchanged. And like there's stories about me giving and receiving. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think like you have to keep on like experiencing life and love and yeah, following that.
Yeah, that's really good. And then how do mushrooms play a part in the process?
um how do mushrooms I don't know
Like you
if
mention it in the book, and I've seen some pictures and stuff.
sure.
How did you get introduced to that?
A friend, so in Canada mushrooms are basically decriminalized, like they're
Right.
not like a legal thing that you can like, but there are in Vancouver where I live, there are like dispensaries that just sell psilocybin mushrooms.
Hmm.
um and I always was not really interested in that. Like for for a lot of my youth and throughout my 20s, I was mostly pretty like substance free.
Mm.
And yeah, a few years ago, a friend just was like a really close and trusted friend. She just for my birthday gave me some psilocybin mushrooms, and she was like, "I think these could help you." And for some reason, I was for the first time, I was just open. I was like, huh, yeah, it actually feels kind of right. And maybe it's because I'm older and I was in a pretty stable place mentally and emotionally. Um, yeah, so I tried them and in a very kind of like conservative, like cautious way.
Well, you're like
And
microdosing.
I started microdosing and then I just kind of slowly kind of tested what it was doing to me. And I was like,
Oh,
okay, this is like positive, it seems.
okay.
And yeah, that just like it opened up my mind in ways that it had been closed down by life. I feel like there's parts of me that were kind of um, bogged down that it kind of just like opened up. And then I got like just walking in the forest where I go every day for a walk. I started noticing like medicinal mushrooms growing there that I had remembered reading about. And um, I guess, yeah, there's no way for me to talk about it all without sounding like a complete, like, nature loving hippie. That's
Yeah.
like, there's no way. Cause yeah, it's just like these, I write about it in the book. It's like I developed a relationship with like
Hmm.
these mushrooms that's a bit kind of like with a human friend or a pet or whatever. It's just like such an intimate and beautiful connection to have.
What
Um,
what what did it really like do for you? Like, how did it feel? Like, I've tried it once. Actually, no, I lied. I tried it twice.
like the psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah, but the ones I
Uh,
tried were the microdosing because I had got
sure.
it from a guy from Toronto. Yeah.
Man, well, I have to preface everything by saying like I'm definitely no expert or you know what I mean? I'm
Oh,
just a
okay. Yeah.
dude, right? I'm just a
Yeah.
dude that's like this has been a helpful thing in my
Yeah.
life. And the thing that it like if I was to as a writer, I like to like
Hmm.
summarize things. So let me try and summarize it. But I think it just the things that were like on my heart or like at the
Hmm.
back of my mind that wanted it to be felt, it just helped me really feel them. The things
Mm.
that maybe my ego or my habitual ways of thinking, it just felt like the first thing it did was it like I was in the forest and all of a sudden I just felt the intimate love that I always have had for nature, that life and becoming an adult and like disowning certain parts of myself, I had just forgotten about that. And it got opened back up. And I'm like, this is everything.
Hmm.
And I felt it when I was high, but then after that, it was like, no, 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 this is open now. And I have to, like, this is how I get my strength as a person. Other people have sports or cars or whatever. For me, it's like, I need to go walk with the trees and be
Yeah.
reminded, like, how small I am.
Yeah. Because, well, for me, I know when I tried it the first two times, like it was microdosing. So I wasn't really feeling I didn't get any like a psychedelic trip or anything like that. Um, but I know that I actually did prefer that feeling compared to the THC and CBD edibles.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's dispensaries all over Toronto for those as well. But for me with the microdosing with the mushrooms, I actually felt, I don't know, better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, and the reason I write about it in my books is like it's kind of like the porn thing. It's just like these are like how, big pillars of my experience that are meaningful and
Yeah.
um yeah, just things that have helped and been like guiding hands along the way. Because I guess that's another thing that I've tried to embody in the writing is just like we all need more than ourselves,
Mhm.
like for me that's why opening up that connection to nature has been so important, because it's this thing that I can go back to every day to just like it's bigger than me, it's more strong than, it's like more solid than me, it's more stable than me, and I can just
Mhm.
like kind of go there and feel it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then also I think it was your TikTok that I saw that you did a post on that you've been a waiter for a long time, that you were in that profession for a very long, like you're in that profession for a very long time. Is there a reason why you stayed like in that profession for a long time?
Well, it's relative. I've been for 6 years, so it's not that long, but
Oh,
it's
okay, okay.
yeah,
I don't know why I
it's
was
a
thinking 10 years. I'm probably thinking of myself.
it's been a chunk of life. Yeah, it's been longer than I thought it would have been when I got the job.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I think I also like I think some writers and like influencers and stuff would like completely negate that part of their life and like leave it out. And to
Yeah.
me,
So
it
that's
was
why I
just
actually thought it was interesting. Sorry to cut you there. That's
yeah,
why I actually thought it was interesting because I'm like, you're actually telling me that this is what you do for a living, but you're also a writer. Whereas somebody else will come out and just be like, oh, I'm a writer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But for me, it was like instead of hiding that stuff, like the shadow or whatever, it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's actually like where that's one of the most beautiful parts of my life because before being a waiter, I had spent a lot of time like alone and kind of in hermit mode. And
Mm,
so for me, being a waiter is being a way of kind of like reconnecting to humanity and
mm,
figuring, yeah, I've learned so much about communication and how much we have in common. Like, because I've always felt like a weirdo. I went and like I've spent a lot of time alone in nature, and now I'm working this job with like quote unquote normal people. And I realized like, wait a minute, we're all the same. And they
yeah.
feel like weirdos too. And there's all of these people I get to serve and be kind to or get annoyed by or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
it's been a very like as a writer, like if I wanted to look like the most successful writer in the world, I probably wouldn't post about how I'm a waiter. Like,
Right.
but as an actual writer, that's been like crazy fuel for my growth. Like, both because I have experiences there that I can write about, but more than anything, because it's like helped broaden my heart and my concept of like humanity and how to communicate with people and be nice to people and stuff.
I think you've done an excellent job, from what I've read in the book so far, as this really shedding the ego. I think a lot of us are, what I guess what I'm exposed to on my environment and social media is we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? And we're just always like, you got to have this job, you got to have this hustle, you have that, whatever. But you did such a brilliant job of just like, this is also normal. This is okay. Like this life is not meant to be like, you have six cars in your garage or anything like that. And just loving life doesn't have to look like that then. It can look
Yeah, I mean,
simple.
yeah, totally. Like, I think I'm a natural minimalist. So there's a part of me that can be satisfied with less than others. And I think if someone has like a bunch of cars, that's cool. That's their
Yeah.
thing. But I think learning to love what's here right now is kind of a transcendent thing because I know that for me, like when I, as a writer or whatever, if I sell a certain number of books or if I have a post go viral or whatever, it's like that doesn't make a person like that's not like a warm fuzzy connection in the real world or whatever. It's amazing to have goals and it feels really good to like strive towards them and that's like a beautiful thing, but I don't know, I just think it's really important to learn how to love like what's here because that's going to be the muscle that you want to bring with you when you have like more or less or whatever.
So what advice would you give anyone who wants to learn to love life a little bit more?
Just don't take my advice, don't take anybody's advice.
Learn it on your own.
Not learn it and figure out what lights you up, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, if there's something that you're too embarrassed to try or whatever, or yeah, like yeah, but I I've
Okay.
I think because I've been burned by taking too much advice, that's like kind of is definitely baked into my writing now. I don't want to like, I'm very cautious with the
So figure like, well, I guess let life be the lesson, the teacher. Let life
just
be the
learn to
teacher.
drink in the beauty of life, I guess.
Yeah.
Like just learn
Okay.
to like soak in the beauty and maybe because it's like almost Christmas time, there's so many like Christmas movies and Christmas stories where like what happens is there's like a closed-hearted curmudgeonly character,
Yeah.
right? Like the Scrooge or
Yeah.
the It's a Wonderful Life or whatever, the Grinch.
Hmm.
And
Well, I love the Grinch.
yeah, and what happens in all of these is there's this like procession of events or whatever, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, everything around me is beautiful. Like
Yeah.
they maybe couldn't see it for whatever reason, and they just have this, like, their heart gets awakened and they can just like see the beauty of it and enjoy. I think that that's a pretty profound thing we can all do with our imaginations. Is like, and there's certain things you don't want to find the beauty in, you know what I mean? Like some,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
certain things that are like, yeah, that's not making me find the beauty in life. That's breaking my heart.
Yeah, that's true. So,
Yeah.
what has inspired you in life on your journey? Is there any books, podcasts, or anything that has truly just inspired you that you would recommend to others?
Oh, I don't know.
Either
Well,
recommend or just let us know what has inspired you.
sure, I'll pay my respects to the people who helped inspire me for sure. Like, I think the first book that I really read voluntarily was a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Have you heard of it or read it?
Mm.
It's
What's it called?
it's Siddhartha,
Mhm.
Siddhartha. It's like the name of the Buddha. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing
Oh,
it correctly.
okay.
Siddhartha.
Uh-huh.
It's it was written by a man named Hermann Hesse, who was a German author in like 100 years ago or something. And when I was in high school, my high school girlfriend gave a copy of it to me, and it was just this like really kind of like simple, beautiful retelling of the life of the Buddha. And it was just like a human version of this young person who's born into like riches, who turns away from that. And it was just a really like, when I read the book, it didn't say anything about television, but immediately after reading it, I quit watching TV. I was like, oh, it's over. Like, life is way too beautiful for that.
So, do
And
you
it
still
just like,
not watch TV?
I don't own a TV, but I'll watch like YouTube and stuff. So I basically watch TV,
Okay.
but not really. But it just like reading that book, like within a couple of years of reading it, I spent a summer alone in nature as like an 18-year-old kid or whatever. So it was just this thing that I couldn't recognize it at the time. But looking back, it's like, whoa, that book changed my life. And there's been a couple of those books that like, yeah, it's like all of a sudden I'm going in a very different direction. And that
Okay,
was one of them.
wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
like, I think it might have just been like the right thing at the right time for me. It's been so many years since I've read it, but it's definitely like, you know, it's, books can be like really, really life changing things. It's a very unique like medium as far as like how deep it can touch and how deeply relatable it can be.
Okay, nice. I don't know if, I mean, I read on my TV.
Oh, nice. I don't think there's
Yes.
anything wrong with TV. I really like Seinfeld. Like,
Yeah. I actually I'm not like I don't have like Netflix or anything, so I have like YouTube and I'll read on my television because it's
oh,
just
cool.
the screen is more wide. So instead of using
Yeah.
my small iPad or Kindle or anything, yeah, I just find it's just like so much better.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So shout out to Herman Hesse for writing that book. And
Okay.
then, yeah, there's been like a few pivotal books over the years that have kind of like
Yeah.
helped.
And judging from this particular book that I'm reading, people inspire you.
Yeah, people and nature. Nature is
Yeah.
a huge inspiration. And then, yeah, like this book was, yeah, like it was really inspired by, yeah, like just kind of like the elderly neighbor I have, like I didn't know how long he was going to be around for, and I'm like, man, I kind of like, I need to write this, and there was kind of
Yeah.
a fire under me because he could be gone in a month. So I really
Yeah.
want him to be able to like see this. And then I finished it and I shared it with him, and he was like so moved, and it was just this. And my previous book, it was kind of for my dad. And so yeah, there keeps on being these like muses that I have, but they're not
Yeah.
like, they're dudes. They're like
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
older men, but they're definitely like, there's been like actual like people and a sense of urgency to like send love to them. So that's been a big inspiration.
Yeah, because even the lady at the restaurant where I think her and her husband were there and I think her dad had passed away that day. Yeah. So it seems like people, well, and nature too, that seem to be inspirational to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
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 And the experiences. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people reach you?
You can find me on TikTok,
Hmm.
Miles Olsen, Milesolsen. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, my website, milesolsen.com. Yeah, my book is A Different Kind of Power, my latest book, and you can find it on Amazon and
And it's a
elsewhere.
good book because if a book makes me tear up, I know it's good.
Oh, thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
All right.